So basically, I ordered this book, and it pertains to our guest, our special guest for the night, right? I know with the voice it sounds like we're about to do phone sex, but we're not. We're going to get into something real serious. But I was reading this, and I was thinking, man, how accomplished is this guy, right? So, a noted TED speaker, okay? TED Talks are all the rage.
All the rage.
At the businesses and everything else. A noted TED speaker, right? Testified before Congress, right? Worked abroad with the State Department.
Check.
Trained FBI agents.
Check.
And has helped hundreds of individuals break free from hate.
It's awesome.
Awesome. Christian Picciolini, welcome to the show, man.
Welcome, man.
Yeah. Thank you. It's so nice to be here. Finally.
Dude, no. It is nice for me. Do you have any idea? If you ask my partner, I don't get hyped up over a lot of things. This may look like low energy for me, but I'm excited that you're here to be with us today because it's huge. And long story short, I came across you, right? I've heard your name in passing, and you never really put a name to a face, right? But I've heard the name. And then I was watching Trafficked, and I said, I know this name. Is this guy? And I just saw him, and I saw a little more of the story. I was like, holy shit, it's this guy. And I was like, you know what? Probably a snowball's chance in hell is what they say, or a long shot. I want to reach out and see if this guy would be willing to sit down, because we've had multiple conversations about what we can do to try to broach this topic. And I was like, you know what? He's probably not even going to answer. He's not even going to answer. When I say I saw the email come through, man, I was so excited. I was like a kid on Christmas morning. I was like, holy shit, this guy actually answered, right? He actually fucking answered. And then we go back and forth for a little bit, 1 or 2 emails, right? And then he's like, I'm kind of stepping away from things for a little bit. It's crushed. It's like, shit. It's like, shit, he's stepping away, right? But it's okay. He said, if you get back to me, right, get back to me in about a couple months. And when I said a couple months, I literally 60 days. I said, I'm going to hit you up on this day, right? Because I didn't want to lose this, man.
Yeah,
and what I can say for someone that doesn't know me from anybody, this guy is a man of his fucking word, because lo and behold, 6 years later, he's like, let's do this.
Excellent.
So I know I already gave you an introduction, but I want to thank you again, man, for coming on, right? So
it's a pleasure, man. Thank you for having me.
For those that don't know, Christian Picciolini has written a lot of books. You guys are going to hear about everything that's kind of going on. But the first book that I was ever put onto was White American Youth, right? Great book. Great book. So everybody, I would suggest to go check it out, pick it up wherever you can. I know it's available on Amazon. You can get it on Christian's, like I'm plugging your shit for you, on Christian's website as well, which we'll link in the bio. But it's an awesome story about your life and everything that you've been through. Crazy. And then one of the books that you're really, the newest one, right? If I'm correct, right? Breaking Hate right here. Confronting, here, I'll let you get a beautiful artwork there.
Excellent.
Confronting the new culture of extremism. I know, Christian, and I'm talking a lot, is because I'm humbled by you, man, and everything that you have done, your story and everything about it. And I have so many questions for you. And I was speaking with Aaron about this, and look, I have so many questions, and I'm so into this, I forgot the music. That's how serious this is, right? So, that being said, though, I had a lot of questions for you, because I know a lot of times, a lot of the talks that you've done, a lot of the things that you've done, I feel like you've been asked a lot of the same questions, right? What made you get into this? What made you get out of this? What was the turning point? And you've probably answered those 100,000 times, right? And I was thinking to myself, what could be different in this conversation? Because a lot of times people look at you. Some people are still going to say, those people don't ever really change. Those people don't ever really have any type of difference, whatever. And some people will hold a hate for you for someone that they don't even know the person that you are. And I realized, as I looked into and I read your books, like, before and I will say this before, I'd probably be like, oh, that was just a racist motherfucker and blah, 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 blah. But I didn't realize how ignorant I was to everything that's involved in it myself. And I think even coming from a person of color, we're really ignorant to the fact of like how much, you know, the mental mind games and all that's involved in it, and the recruiting this process. And the people that are there aren't necessarily, you know, we can't take it as face value because there's so much more there, you know. And you have really opened my eyes to a lot of things, especially going through the books and reading that I wasn't aware of, man. I don't even know where to begin.
Well, let me start. It's a real privilege to be here. You know, given the story that we're about to tell, given my past, you know, there aren't a whole lot of folks that look like you that get the same chances that I get. So I want to acknowledge that. You know, it's a privilege to be here. It's a privilege to live every day. You know, it's a privilege to be able to try and repair the damage that I had caused for 8 years of my life in my youth. And it's a privilege to be given, you know, access to some of the things that I'm working on right now. So I just want to say that, you know, we still unfortunately live in a world where, you know, black and brown young men aren't given the same chance that I was given. So I want to make good on that.
Right. And I have a question. I guess we'll just jump right in and get to the nitty gritty of it all. I mean, for me, it's just interesting. So tell us a little bit about when you talk about one of the things I guess I want to start from my perspective of the ignorance portion of it. What I have noticed a lot is I've encountered a lot of racism in my life. I know Aaron has as well, you know, especially since I moved to the South, you know, and it's still very much, as much as they say, oh, it's not here, it's still here. It's
ingrained.
You know, I've spent a lot of time here in Texas where we are. Also, I spent a lot of time in the Florida area and around the Bradenton, Sarasota area. There's a lot going on in that area as well. But generally speaking, one of the things that I always thought was interesting, and this is maybe off topic for me, but when we think of like a situation like you were in, we always looked at it as, oh, well, this is a group of people that hits black people, right? But whenever you see the speech that's happening, and especially like even in like the Trafficked episode that you did with Mariana, there's a lot of a conversation that focuses around the Jews and the Jewish people. It's not so much the black people or the Asian people or it's whatever. It's the Jewish people. So I guess my question to you, and maybe you might know, is why is it so vocal about the Jewish people, but then the physical violence that you see mostly or whatever is catered around black people or Asian people or whatever it is? Is that just like a media spin of things, or?
Well, I think it comes down to ignorance first and foremost. I mean, you know, to think any of those things that, you know, somebody is less than somebody else is just, you know, based in plain old ignorance. But, you know, maybe just for folks, you know, who are listening, I was recruited into a neo-Nazi white power skinhead group when I was 14 years old. I spent 8 years of my life, and that was in 1987 when I was 14. And I spent 8 years of my life as part of that movement very early on. And I learned, you know, a lot of the conspiracy theories that you're talking about, you know, about Jewish people, that they were kind of at the center of controlling everything, you know, from media and finance, and that this very small minority of people, you know, were kind of pulling the strings for what was happening in the world. And it couldn't be further from the truth. And I also, you know, was taught that as a white man, that anybody who wasn't a white man was lesser than me. You know, and I even put white women into that, you know, and that's something that isn't talked about a lot too, is that they really denigrate women as part of these groups. It isn't just about race. But yeah, I was taught lies that, you know, people who were black were lesser than me, that they worked less than I was willing to work, or that they weren't as smart as I was. And the truth was that, you know, the people I surrounded myself with, neo-Nazis and white supremacists, were not some of the smartest people, were not some of the hardest working people. And in fact, were some of the people that were causing a lot of the problems in the black community. They were the ones who were bringing drugs into those communities. You know, we talk about structural racism, and the people who were maybe a little bit smarter than the skinheads hanging around with were the ones who were controlling the systemic racism. They were the ones who, kind of controlled all those levers of power. And they weren't Jewish, they weren't black, they weren't brown, they were white men. And that was the truth of it. And, as a 14-year-old kid, I hadn't been raised racist. My parents are Italian immigrants. They were, kind of the victims of prejudice when they first came to the United States in the 1960s. So it really wasn't something that they taught me. Certainly I was a part of, a white supremacist system, but my parents had friends from all different kinds of races from all over the world and different religions. And I did have exposure to that. But I also, as a kid, was looking for something that wasn't available to me. I was looking for the acceptance of my parents, and they were off working as immigrants. They had to work really hard. They were gone, like 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, running a small, barber shop and beauty shop. And I was trying to look for their attention. So at 14, when a guy came up to me in an alley and he said, hey, and I was smoking a joint, and he came up to me and he pulled a joint out of my mouth. He's like, hey, that's what the Jews want you to do to keep you docile, to keep you under control. I didn't know what the hell the word docile even meant. And I didn't even know if I'd met a Jewish person in my life, but it was kind of like the first person that saw, that tried to reel me in, that, saw me as a friend, because I was bullied. I didn't have very many friends at that age. And this guy was like 21 years old. And he said, you know what, you're going to be a great white man if you just listen to what I have to tell you. And I wasn't great at anything. But I had aspirations. I was idealistic as a kid, and I started listening to the lies he was telling me. And I didn't know that they were lies until, much later. And he drew me in, kind of like a predator would draw in, anybody. But, I bought in. Like, I'm accountable for what I did, because I spent 8 years doing that. And I then started to do to other people what he did to me, tried to pull them in based on those lies too. But to answer your question, why, what was I taught about Jewish people and black people? I was taught as a white man, young man, that I was doing something of great importance. I was saving the white race from extinction. And we talk a lot about like replacement theory, like when in Charlottesville, when they were chanting the Jews will not replace us. That's what I was taught, that everybody else who wasn't a white man was replacing me, was taking away what was rightfully mine. And at 14 years old, nothing was fucking rightfully mine, right? Like, what the hell was rightfully mine? Right. But yeah, so I bought in, and unfortunately I spent 8 years doing that until I was able to finally start to realize the harm that I was causing, the damage I was doing, not just to myself and my community, but everybody that I hadn't even met, just by kind of putting this out into the world. And I started to pull away when I turned right around the age of 22. And at that point, I was a leader in that movement. But I started to pull away because I started to see the damage that I was doing to other people.
No, it's sorry, you want to jump in?
No, go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, so it's interesting. One of the things that you said, you talked about the buy-in. And it's so crazy. I mean, first of all, the fact that you're where you're at is huge, but even more so the fact that you're holding yourself accountable to the things that happened is even better. But it's so interesting to see that, you're holding yourself accountable for having to buy in at 14. And to me, that's just, it kind of blows my mind, because like, I don't know. I'm not in your mind
now.
Yeah, right.
I'm 48 years old right now.
but like I'm not in your mind, right? And I can't be you, and I can't tell you how to feel, but it's just weird. Like I don't want to say I feel bad for you, but at the same time, like I feel like you beat yourself up for having to buy into something at the age of 14. I was dumb as fuck at 14. Like, I can't beat myself up for that. I would have bought into anything. You could have told me, I don't know, sky was red, and I'm like, hey, it might be, man. I don't know, but like, it's just so weird to see that, I don't know, that you hold yourself accountable for that.
I appreciate that, but I'm not a victim. I mean, I still, while I may have been victimized at some point in 14, by somebody who was older, I really quickly started to see what the rewards were for my behavior. And I say rewards because there were rewards for my racist behavior. I suddenly found a group that, I thought respected me. I started to win, kind of the approval of adults in my neighborhood and things like that. but I knew what I was doing. So I mean, while I appreciate that, and thank you for saying that. I mean, I'm certainly no victim. There were certainly a lot more people that I victimized.
See, this is why this guy's great. You see how humble he is, bro?
Yeah,
It don't matter.
What has been for you? So you clearly made a quick transition through the organization,
Yeah.
right? Then you made an abrupt kind of shift, you know, and that transition. So even today, what is the backlash that you receive from writing books of this sort, you know, from the organization that is clearly still alive and well, you know, and still moving? You know, what is some of the backlash that you've had to kind of endure as part of standing up for what you know is right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the movement now is probably, unfortunately, stronger than it was even back then when I was involved. I think
Yeah.
what we're seeing now are, you know, mainstream politicians who are saying the same things that, you know, a neo-Nazi 18-year-old me used to say.
Right.
But they're saying them publicly, and these are people with power, with agency. You know, as far as backlash, you know, I've always kind of gotten threats for what I've said. I've always, you know, had my old kind of, you know, friends, you know, see me as a traitor, a race traitor. That's what they call me. And you know, I've gotten death threats from people that I don't even know because of that. But you know what? It's been 20 plus years that now I've been doing this work. 26 years since I've gotten out, but 20 plus years since I've been doing this work once I found the courage to start doing it. And life has never been better. I feel genuine now. I feel like I'm fighting for a cause that I truly believe in, and not just one that was covering up kind of my own insecurity, you know, poking at other people because I felt insecure because I didn't have the courage. And I feel like I do have the courage now to speak the truth. Like I know what I stand for. I know who I stand with.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing could make me feel stronger than that. So, you know, while I do get, you know, some backlash for the work that I do, it's been, you know, 20 some years. They haven't gotten to me yet, and they never will.
Yeah, I got you.
No, I mean, that's crazy to hear. And I was wondering, I mean, the same thing that you asked. I'm glad you asked it, Aaron.
Yeah.
Just because like that's such a huge thing, right? Like I can't imagine the mental, maybe because you dealt with it for so long, but the mental weight of that, right? Like you see these people on there, you know, on social media or whatever, and they're, oh, I got to get off. I'm about to lose my mind because someone told them that they look ugly in a dress, right? But you're like dealing with real world, you know, consequences here with some pretty serious stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and you're handling it. Like, I mean, did it ever get to you, or were you just, it is what it is because you've made your mind up?
I mean, you always think about it. You always worry about your family and you know, the people that you care about, and if they might get to them, because they're certainly innocent. They've never, you know, been involved with anything, and you know, you wonder if things like that could hurt them. And you know, it's gotten close to that a couple of times, but certainly, you know, nothing that you know to speak of. I think what pisses me off even more is when good people don't listen. You know, the bad people can talk all they want. I'm good at filtering that stuff out. I've gotten really good at brushing, you know, that kind of shit off.
Right.
What really bothers me today is that we have a big problem, and good people aren't listening. You know, aside from the good people, there are even bad people out there who claim that racism doesn't exist.
Right,
That it's a
right.
lie, right? Like, you know, it couldn't be further from the truth. And here I was, like, on the inside of that, looking at it grow exponentially as a whole now, and say we're really in fucking trouble if we don't do something about this now. And there are still people that aren't listening to that, or at least willing to do anything about it. So
one of the things that, do you have a question? I have so many questions. I've been thinking about this for 3-4 months. I don't know. One of the things that I hear a lot, and you mentioned it, is, you know, wanting a place to belong, wanting some sort of attention. Usually these people prey on people that are, you know, I don't want to say a weaker of mind or whatever the situation is, but people in need of something. And for yourself, you know, you said you got bullied or picked on a lot. I mean, I guess for me, do you feel that was a legitimate thing, or was that a mental thing for you that you felt like you didn't fit in? Because like going through this book, and the reason I'm holding this book, like I go through some of these pictures in here, and I look at you, you know, I look at some of these pictures in here, right? I don't know if they can see that there. You were a good looking guy, You're a good looking guy. You were talented. You were in a band. You played music. I mean, what about you felt like you weren't good enough, man? I mean, to me, it looks like you were killing it, you know?
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I always, from the outside looked like I was strong, but I was really weak. That's the truth. I think what it boils down to is all of us, every single person on earth, we're all at some point in our life searching for a sense of identity, community, and purpose, right? And we're all looking for that. Those are things that drive us. They make us who we are. They kind of shape our values, and they're really important kind of pillars of who we are. But some of us, and maybe all of us too, hit what I call potholes in life, and that search for those three things. Potholes are things like trauma, right? And for me, trauma was the feeling of abandonment from my parents. Could have been maybe being bullied. It was a lot of things. I was very insecure. And the circumstances lined up to where I was looking for a sense of identity, community, and purpose. And when I was at my lowest, kind of when I was, felt defeated or was given up, somebody walked up to me and promised me those things. And they were very clear when they promised them. They said, you're going to be a warrior. That's what your identity is. Your community is us. We're your family. If you feel like your real family has abandoned you, well, we'll take you in. And they did treat me like a family. Like there was camaraderie, there was brotherhood and all that stuff. When we weren't destroying the world, we treated each other with some level of respect. We were friends. And, purpose was defined for me. I'd gone from this 14-year-old kid who didn't know anything about anything. I was trading baseball cards with myself in a closet in my grandparents' house because I didn't have any friends. The purpose was given to me. They said, well, you're now going to save something you're going to do something of great value. You're going to save the white race. You are going to stand up. You're going to be strong. You're going to fight. And you're going to be seen as this great warrior. And, at 14, I didn't come close to any of that stuff. And suddenly it changed. So it wasn't so much that I was broken, that I was beat down and I had nowhere else to go. I mean, to some degree that was true. I didn't really have a lot of options because it was kind of a lower middle class area where I grew up. But, so all of a sudden things changed. And suddenly I felt like that warrior that they told me I was. And when I started to say things and do things, the bullies that would pick on me avoided me. So something in me, felt like I was strong, but I wasn't, strong. I was just kind of following the crowd. And because it was such a small crowd, eventually I was able to rise up in it and kind of start to dictate things. And when I started to dictate things and become a leader, I lost my mind. Once I had that power and I had kind of that freedom to do what I wanted, I became a different person because I didn't know how to use it. I abused it. And so I started to hurt other people because of that. And I started to, say things and do things and make music that hurt other people because there were no consequences for what I did. Yeah. Back then, you think there are no consequences for people now who feel white privilege and are doing, racist shit? Back then, nobody even knew that kind of, that world existed, or at least people were really blind to it. White people were. And there were no consequences for my actions. So I just kept going deeper and I started feeling more bold. And I'd forgotten kind of who that shy, innocent, 14-year-old kid was, even though I was only 15, 16, 17, and 18 years old. I'd suddenly forgotten where I came from and who that kid was. And I became somebody else. And, again, no excuses. I knew exactly what I was doing and I bought into it. But it was also, I wasn't held accountable for what I did. And I think that was part of the problem.
Okay. Yeah. I'm like, my mind is just racing, right? Because I see, there's certain groups are demonized, right? And so if you see a gang of Hispanics or a gang of African American or a gang of brown people, they're seen as a threat, right? Whereas, white American youth, or have pulled together these organizations, and there seems like there's some support in the back end somewhere that clearly we don't know anything about, right? And so my question is with that being said, was there some support? Well, you said there were no consequences. Why weren't there any consequences? Like, who was part of the organization, or where was the support from that allowed you guys to just be free forming and do whatever you wanted to without any regard or any consequences for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was people turning a blind eye to the things we were doing because they thought, well, they didn't agree with like our tactics. They didn't want to be associated with us. I'm talking about white people in my neighborhood and in my community. While they would say, oh, we don't agree with racism, we'd also get pats on the back saying, thanks for keeping our neighborhood safe, or keeping, black people out of our neighborhood, or doing whatever. So, and I'm talking about cops, I'm talking about business owners, I'm talking about, parents of kids in the neighborhood. I'm talking about strangers certain times that, would never in a million years say they agreed with what we were doing or what we said. But when nobody was looking, would pat us on the back and saying, good job, keep it up.
They appreciated the benefits of what you guys were doing.
Absolutely. And I think that's what most white people in America do, is they may say, I'm not a racist, I'm not a white supremacist, but they benefit from the system of white supremacy, in everyday life. Right. So, they're not working hard against it. That's why it's so important to be anti-racist and not just not racist. I think that's important to recognize, is we were, it was like this indirect support we were getting from people in our community who were out of one side of their mouth saying, this is bad, but at the other side of their mouth were saying, keep it up.
Gotcha. What is your purpose in writing these books? Who is the audience that you're talking to that needs to hear your voice until you leave this earth? Who is that audience?
Well, I mean, when I went in writing my first book, my memoir, White American Youth, I didn't have an audience. I wrote it for my family, because I wanted to apologize to them, because I had, while I had done a lot of work in community to make good on the harm that I had caused, I'd never really kind of apologized to my own family for that. So I wrote part of it to explain to them, one, it wasn't their fault. And I know it seems like that because they, I felt like abandoned by them and this and that, but they also did their best to raise me as an anti-racist person, as a, kind of a, an empathetic person. So part of that was that, and part of it was to write it for my kids so that they would have a story to understand about me, so they wouldn't follow the same path. And I've self-published the book at first. I think I published like 25 copies. And this was years before, the White American Youth book that you have. I self-published it for my own family. And again, this was at a time when nobody in America cared. Nobody in America thought in white America thought there was a problem with racism. This was 15 years ago when I think I started writing that book, or maybe even longer than 20 years ago. And nobody cared. Nobody wanted to publish it. I didn't even try. And, I published it for my family, and then somebody got a hold of it and said, hey, you really should think about publishing this, because it's a story that I think a lot of people need to hear. So when I did publish it eventually as White American Youth, it was originally called Romantic Violence, Memoirs of an American Skinhead, and then it was republished by a publisher as White American Youth. I started to understand that my market, that the people I was writing it for was everybody in America. It was people who were white and young who could have potentially gone down that path. It was people who were black and brown, to understand what happens in that world, and to understand, why people like me did the things that they did. And it wasn't because of them, right? It was because of the stupidity of people like me, and not because of any, reason of being black or brown. I started to understand that, the things that I went through, a lot of people really can relate to, because, I was at one point an innocent 14-year-old kid who knew nothing about racism and didn't participate in that. And then suddenly I was, and suddenly I did. And what it takes to cross that line, to flip over, it's not as hard or as tough as some people think. Like, it happened relatively quickly, and I wasn't like an abused kid. I wasn't like homeless. I wasn't, I came from a family that loved me, that cared about me. And for it to happen to somebody like me, I think really shows that it can happen to a lot of people if the circumstances line up that way. I started to realize that, there are so many people that can kind of benefit from hearing that story, because it's a world that most people aren't really a part of, thankfully, and it's unfortunately it's something that affects all of us, though.
Yeah, most definitely.
That's huge in its own. I guess really when you talk about, the book's great. You're welcome to borrow the books if you want. I know you can buy them though. Support. Everybody should support Christian and buy his books. I'm trying to send mine to get autographs, so I don't really want to lend them out too much. I don't want too many hands on them.
I'll get my own book.
But Aaron, you can send me your book too.
Yeah, I would get my own book, man.
But when we do talk about it, and you talk about, not a lot of people really know what goes on behind the curtain. Not a lot of people really knows, and we talked about not people really supporting you on one end and not condoning on the other. Like, I don't know if you can really speak upon this. How do these groups, how are they finding the money to do what they do? Like, how are they finding the support to do what they do?
Yeah. Back then in the 80s and 90s, we had a really, really hard time making money. I was in a band and made no money doing that. Even made records and toured in Europe and still made no money doing that. But I think the internet changed everything. They waited it out long enough to where the internet made it democratic. Everybody can make money, somehow on the internet. So I think a lot of people in that movement, some of them invested in like crypto really early, because they were kind of part of like the Reddit tech world, like kind of underground kind of message board world and gaming and stuff like that. And I think, they're regular people too. They hold jobs. But I think these days, there's so much exposure to mainstream politicians and mainstream media that Fox News is saying the exact same things that I said when I was saluting a Nazi flag in some cases. They're spreading the same conspiracy theories.
Right.
They're catering to that world. So you imagine how much money they're making doing that. But also, the internet, Patreon, these days, Patreons, people donate, subscribe to podcasts. They have their own podcasts. So they're living in this kind of shadow world where they're creating the same types of things, the same type of content that other people are creating, but they're monetizing it just like everybody else, unfortunately.
Right.
And I also think that, in the last decade, I've seen, a foreign influence in the American white supremacist movement. For years, and if you've read Breaking Hate, this, for years, countries like Russia have been influencing the American far right for decades, even, have been influencing the American extreme right and the far right. And, I don't know if that means money is flowing over, but it certainly means some sort of a support is. So, I think that they're really they're finding ways to make money just like everybody else is kind of scrounging to make money these days.
It's interesting that you say that, because I think, from my perspective and the people, that I've talked to, of color, whatever, I think that a lot of them just assume that it's just a bunch of rich people that have this money, or they're funding this thing or whatever.
Well, that too. That too. That is happening.
Where are these people? Where do they reside? Like, where do you see the most influence? Where do you see, like you said, you mentioned they raise money, some of them, Reddit, Bitcoin, gamers, whatever. Like, where do you see them? Before it was more, I guess, in the streets. Now it's more digital, but I don't know if that makes sense. Like, where do you see the need for help? Where are they rising up through, if you will?
Yeah, I hate to say it, but they're kind of everywhere. Right. They're your neighbors. They're your dentists. They're your police officers in some cases. They're, politicians that, we see on Capitol Hill.
Right.
They're your Marjorie Taylor Greens and your Paul Gosars, your elected officials.
Yeah.
These are people that go regularly to white nationalist and white supremacist conferences. And the minute they get called out on it, they say, oh, I didn't know it was a white nationalist conference. What do you mean? Somebody paid you money. You got in a plane. You booked a hotel room. You spoke with somebody at the conference that booked you. You saw the people that attended. You heard other people speaking at the conference. You spoke at the conference. And now you're going to tell me you had no idea what you were participating in?
Right.
How many times in your day and in your life do you not know what you're, you may go into something not knowing, but once you go through with it, you know exactly what you participated in. And they keep making these, quote unquote mistakes over and over and over again. So yeah, unfortunately, I mean, I hate to say it, I don't want to scare anybody. Like, there's not this mass Klan rally that's about to take place or anything like that. But
Right.
unfortunately, people who are sympathetic to that cause are everywhere.
Yeah.
And most of them won't admit it. They're not wearing shaved heads. They're not sporting tattoos with swastikas. They're not, doing these things. They are people that we walk by on the street every day. As far as where in America, I mean, you mentioned Florida and Texas earlier in the broadcast, and I hate to say it, but those are two like concentrations of where people.
You're saying I'm in the wrong spot, but I've lived in all the wrong spots.
I think you need to fight for wherever you want to live, bro.
Yeah, no. So, and it's funny. So I'm glad you mentioned something where I was kind of going next, and I'm trying to make I want to make a little light of this here. I know it's not a light topic, but I know some of the people. We've been getting some comments that sometimes we just have some very heavy topics and they need a little humor. But when you're saying, and they're everywhere, right? They're everywhere. First of all, I'm pretty sure I had one of them living next to me.
I mean,
the other day.
Come on, man.
The way he was looking at me and everything else. But that's neither here nor there. But I do wonder, the ones that do hide in the shadows, if you will, like the dentist. That's why I don't like to go to the dentist, because I feel one times he was digging in my mouth and he hit some shit on purpose because he didn't like me. But that's neither here nor there. That's neither here nor there. Every time I go in there, I'd be like, every time I sit in this chair, this man does some shit on purpose, and be like, oh, I'm sorry. Like, you know what you did, asshole. But why do they do that, right? Why, if they're so confident, if they're buying into this is how it has to be, why do they fake? Why do you clean my teeth? Why do you look in my eyes, or maybe they aren't giving me the full prescription I need, and that's why I'm kind of blind a little bit. But why do they do that? Why do they pretend to be okay with me and then go home and be like, fuck that guy?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think part of it is they don't have the courage to say that to your face. Part of it is they're worried about the consequences, if there are any of that. Unfortunately, some people won't think twice about saying that stuff. And I think deep down inside, a lot of people probably know it's wrong, but they just, don't know how to do better. And I'm not making excuses for them. I'm just saying that, there's certain things that we do in public that we, or certain things that we do in private that we don't do in public. And I think that they're, probably ashamed of that too, but they still fight for it because that might be, what drives them, what drives their family, what drives their friendships and things like that. But yeah, no, unfortunately, I mean, when I say it's everywhere, I'm not saying like there's a militant neo-Nazi like living in every block or anything like that. What I'm saying is, unfortunately, we live in a country where there are a lot of people, a lot of white people who, have sympathies to those kinds of ideas. Yeah. And again, it's the talking out of both sides of their mouths, right? And listen, and part of it is, why don't they just come out and say, like, I hate Jews or I hate black people? Because they're still trying to recruit people too, right? Like, if they come out and say that, it's easier to recruit people when their language is more palatable. Yeah. When they say, we need to be, when they, a lot of people do that. They ask questions instead of coming out and saying it. They won't say, I hate black people because, they're lazy. They'll say, well, what if, white people, hold more jobs, than black people. And it's because maybe black people aren't willing to do the same work as white people. They ask a question. They're not actually saying it, but they ask questions that are leading to get you to try and think that way. There are a lot of, I won't name names, but there's a lot of really popular podcasters that kind of come close to the line of white supremacy, but don't cross it. And they do that by asking questions. So they're not accountable for what they say, but they're still kind of putting those same ideas out into the air. And I think we need to be careful of that kind of stuff.
Well, let's talk offline about that, because I'm curious who that is. I want to know what your opinion is. I have my opinion on that. But no, I don't know. It's for me. I guess for me, I'm a person. I say whatever the fuck's on my mind. That's one of my problems, is that I'll just blurt out what, and it might be half thought through. I don't know, but it's coming out, and I hate to say, I hate everybody. I say it all the time. I hate everybody equally, is what I always say. Everybody gets the same treatment. It doesn't matter who it is, what color, what race, whatever. I just don't like people personally. But that's my own personal mental block and breakthrough that I need to get through. But I wish
we can work on that, man. We can definitely, you and I, we can work on that.
Well,
Yeah,
hey,
please partner with him. Yeah,
please.
Yeah.
That would be a dream. I get my own personal mentor. I feel special. But that, I mean, that is a thing that I struggle with. I struggle with a people aspect. I just, we've done episodes on that, and we're still diving into that. But that's been a thing for me. But I wish, and the whole reason why this whole thing started and why I reached out to you is because I've said on many episodes, I would love to be able to sit down when I sit down, because I don't want them to know where I live and have tiki torches and crosses on my front yard, but talk with an active white supremacist and just ask him why. Because I feel like a lot of times, like, I don't know if that's what they believe. I don't know if it's just because they got their feelings hurt at one point in time and they just never let go of that, or whatever the situation is. Because I feel like a lot of things can be solved with basic communication, you know. And I think that there's fucked up people. I think there's fucked up people in every race, period. You know, but why do we have to exclude, you know, I don't know, can I be a positive change? How can I help to say, hey, you think black people are bad? Well, here's an example, right? Because as black people, we, unfortunately, a lot of us don't act right. And I get a lot of hate for that. And there's some of us, myself, I know Aaron has played a part as well. I'm throwing you in here, so if they come after you, Aaron, I'm sorry. But we have to be the better example all the time. You have to be the better example. You know, if you go out, you got to be dressed to the T so you don't get judged. You have to act a certain way. You have to speak a certain way, because you have to be better so that people don't look at you and think that you're less than whatever, right? How can we roll that? I'm saying a lot of shit, and I'm sorry. How can we roll that into a positive force to help the cause, to help you in your cause? Like, how can I play a part in that? If that makes sense. I said a lot of things, man. I'm sorry. So
no.
There.
That's great. I mean, it kind of makes me feel sad that people have to act that way to cater to white people's white supremacy. Like, you know, there's, you know, so many examples of overwhelming examples of, you know, positivity, you know, in black culture and in brown culture that, you know, that it feels like people are being taught to make excuses for the, you know, the tiny fraction, you know, of people that might be broken. And like you said, I mean, there are fucked up people like everywhere, right? So why should you be made to have to make excuses for those people if that's a, you know, a tiny fraction? And it makes me sad that you have to act a certain way. I understand it, but it makes me sad that you have to act a certain way to cater to my fears, right? The fears that white people have. And it shouldn't be that way. You know, but you're right. For me, I'll tell you what, you know, what was one of the big things that helped me change was not change, but really understand that I needed to do better, because I'd already left the movement. But right after I had left the movement, I started working for a tech company, and that tech company, talk about privilege. Here I was, a neo-Nazi skinhead who left that movement and went to go work for, you know, a large tech company. But I started to work for that company, and it was a low-level job. But one of the place where they sent me, and they had no idea about my past, was back in my old high school to go work for the summer and install like their computers for the summer. It was the whole district. And the first person I saw was the black security guard, one of the people that I had tormented when I was in high school there, when I was a part of that movement. And this was a guy I'd gotten like physical with, like we'd gotten in each other's faces. We had words with each other, you know, like it was not pretty, the things that I had said to him. And a couple of years after I left the movement, I had gone to work for this tech company, and he was the first person I saw when I went to work my first day. And I knew, and I had left the movement already, but I knew I needed to like do something. I needed to say something, because this was a guy who years before had left on really bad terms. And I went to him scared. And I said, listen, I'm sorry for what I did to you. And I don't know if you remember me or not. And of course he remembered me. But he said, don't apologize to me, because that makes you feel good. It doesn't do anything for me. What you need to do, if you want to make good on this, is you have to go out and you have to repair the damage that you caused. You have to tell your story. You know, you have to work through the issues that got you there, and you have to tell people about that, but don't stop there. Go back into the communities that you hurt and ask them if you can help them. He said, don't just walk in and tell them what you're going to do. He says, you have to ask if you can be there. And I did. And they started to accept me. So, to your point, like about talking, that was what did it for me. I started to meet people that I once hated, and I started to recognize that I loved them more and I felt closer to them than I did the people that I had surrounded myself with. And I'm so grateful for that, because he gave me a chance to do that. Not everybody, would have at that point, or should have, I think. But he did. And I'm grateful for that, because, he allowed me to understand that it wasn't just about me not doing that anymore. I had to do more. Like, I had to go back and like fix things. And I've been doing that for 20, some years now. And I'm glad that I did, because I don't know where I would be with having skipped over that part. Accountability from pull them out of hate groups. The first thing, not the first thing is I listen to understand what led them there. But then once I understand that, I have to get them to go back and to fix what they broke. That's part of their accountability. And accountability, or without that accountability, that's just privilege. Like, if you get to just walk away from the bad shit you did and nobody bothers you anymore, even if you say you're sorry, that's privilege. And I think accountability is really important to that process.
So I'm sure it's in these books, but for our audience, man, because you've made it almost feels like a spiritual shift, right? Like, there has to be something that changes your complete thought process from being able to operate the way you did with that gentleman, and then come back and have a conversation where not only did you apologize, but you took what he said to heart and did something with it. Right? Yeah. Because we don't want to be accountable. We don't want to have to hold ourselves accountable just naturally. That's not our dynamic, is to listen to someone's critique of us, hold ourselves accountable to that critique, and then do something with it. So what was it? What has been your foundation? What has been your go-to that keeps you focused on this movement now that you've created?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that staying focused on it keeps me connected to my true self.
Okay.
Because that's who I really am, and I think even that's who I was during those 8 years, but I pushed it down so far to become somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
The truth is I was, a loving, empathetic, caring kid before I was part of that. And I lost myself, and I had to find my way back to that. But in order to find my way back, I had to, like really kind of look at what I had done and how I had hurt people, and then find a way to make good on that. So I think what drives me every day is like, I want to stay true to who I am, and straying from that isn't who I am. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel positive to me. So I try as hard as I can anyway. I'm not always perfect.
Yeah, of course.
But I try as hard as I can to really try and stay true to that.
Really, I guess for me, one of the things that I want to know, at least for you, for the guests, like I said, I have the books. I've read the books. I know a lot of people are probably hearing some stuff for the first time. I encourage them to get them. What is next for Christian? What is? I mean, I know you're on this lifelong mission now, but what is next for you? What do you want to accomplish? And again, I'm going to ask, what can we do? What can I do? What can Aaron do? What can we do to help the cause, man? Because I feel it's weird, right? Because I know if I ask some people, they'll be like, man, fuck that white motherfucker. They owe us this, that, and the other. But no,
you're right.
No, I don't agree with that, man. We all have to do our part.
Yeah.
I was never personally wronged by you, but I do want to help right some of those wrongs, right? Not that I say I want to carry your weight or anybody's weight, but if I can do something to make the world a better place, if I can help fight some of this fight so that there's equality for the next little boy that comes up underneath me, yeah, I want to do that. How can we do that from this side, right? I know you see there's the Daryl Davises of the world, right, that are out there, but there's very few of him, that get that. For us on a day-to-day, what can we do?
That's an impossible question for me to answer. I mean, and the only thing I would say is, we have to just be good people, because that stuff trickles down. It's, just do what you're doing in your own communities, to people you meet every day, in your jobs. Like, you never know who is dealing with what, like on a daily basis, like the people we meet, like, we're all dealing with something that nobody else knows about. And I'll tell you one thing that I found, and it's kind of a secret that shouldn't be a secret, is people don't find their way to those movements necessarily because they're looking for racism. Like, racism exists everywhere, but like I went into something that was like organized, like hate. People don't find their way to organized hate because they're looking for it necessarily. It finds them when they're kind of at their lowest point, or not lowest because there are really rich people who are involved. There are people with a lot of power. I mean, when I say low, like a personal low, like there's a void, something is broken up, they've hit a pothole, and these movements are really, really good at coming in and filling that void and shifting their pain onto somebody else. I always say that people who hate because they hate themselves, not because they hate the person that they're giving that to, right? There's something that they hate about themselves that they're directing elsewhere. So I think what we can all do as human beings is we just need to be better to each other on a daily basis, because you never know who that kindness is going to impact. And it could be, it could land on somebody who, may have opinions like I used to have, and it could help to change them or help to shift them. So many of the people that I've worked with to help pull out of hate groups will tell you that it was because, and I'm not doing this to put like the onus on people of color that they need to do this, because victims or people who've been historically victims shouldn't have to do this. But so many times people have changed because they've had those conversations with the people that they thought that they hated, or they've had an interaction that kind of changed them. And I'm not saying that like it's not your responsibility to be nice to racists, right? Like, that's not what I'm saying. But I think because in this world we don't know who's in that camp anymore, I think we just all have to be good people and be kind to anybody we can, because oftentimes the people who like are the ones that least deserve it are the ones that probably could benefit from it the most, that kindness. So I think just as human beings, we just have to be better human beings. And I think that eventually that will solve it. But we have to be in the business of prevention. We have to start preventing infants from going in that direction and from being affected by this white supremacist and institutionalized racism. Otherwise, we're just creating like factories of racists in the future, and that's not anything that's going to get us out of this problem.
Yeah, man, it's there's really just a lot that I could do this for a while, because there's questions I had about the planning of controlled substances into the neighborhood, right? And the detriment that's had over decades, right? Yeah. And the fixing of that is not a short-term thing, right? No. I mean, I saw people buying toilet paper like crazy with COVID hit, right? And it was out of the necessity to control something, right? Mm-hmm. I don't need it, but out of everything that else is going crazy in my life, at least I can control this, right? And I can buy enough water to make me feel like I did something, or I can buy enough toilet paper to make me feel like I'm secured, right? And I think it's those fears, those inherent fears that are in all of us that, I don't want to sound hopeless, but it's a huge undertaking. And I mean, I think it's, it's just a deep conversation, man, because I mean, I grew up in Louisiana. I'm a true Southern boy, and so I understand it. My dad has told me stories about how he was scared, walking home at night, and he almost peed his pants because he thought it was the Klan coming, but it was a car full of nuns. But it was just that mentality or that thought process, that was so ingrained, that was then passed on to generations, man. And I appreciate the work you're doing, because it's gonna take that to at least change one thought process at a time.
Thank you. I think you nailed it, though. I mean, we're all kind of afraid, right? We're all kind of afraid of each other. We're all kind of afraid of the world we live in. We're all kind of afraid of the powers that be. And I think that what we need to understand, especially when it comes to like systemic and institutional racism, is there is a hell of a lot more of us than there are of them. And we can change things if we want to, if we just decided to come together and go against the powers and say enough is enough. And I'm not advocating like, mass revolution or anything like that, but unified voice really goes a long way. The
Unified
power
voice.
the power of the pocketbook and stuff like that. Like there are things that we can change, but also, no joke, it's not going to be easy, right? This is ingrained in who we are as a nation. This is ingrained in who we are as a society, and the more we like stop looking at that history as truth, and the more we ignore it, I think the worse off we're going to be. We need to understand what happened. We need to understand how we contributed and how we were complicit in it.
Right.
And people talk about like critical race theory and they don't want to teach, this in history. Like, man, I can't think of anything worse than not knowing about what really happened, because then we're just doomed to make those same mistakes over and over and over again if we keep sweeping it under the rug. We're not perfect. We don't need to pretend we're perfect.
Right.
We need to pretend that we are on the track to trying to do better. Not pretend. We need to be on the track to trying to do better, is what we need to do, and stop pretending that that nothing we've ever done is wrong. Right.
Yeah, I think one of the things, and one of the things we've talked about it on the show, and it was one of the biggest things for me, the biggest aha moments that I never knew, and it was my mom. My mom at 70 years old now was still picking cotton when she was in school, and it wasn't slavery, but it was still a systematic approach to, their school let out at noon during cotton picking season, and they were forced to go out and pick cotton. I didn't know that until I was 35 or 36. And so it really shifted my thought process that I wasn't even a full generation out of cotton picking, right? And so that really kind of shifted my thought process into something completely different, that how the same white kids that were in school were the same kids that were in school with my parents, and their parents today who are children my age. Right. And so how much
reinforcing
difference?
those ideas, by seeing your mother doing those types of things. Yeah.
So how much difference are we now? I know we talk about slavery and it's been gone, but today, in that, not even a generation out of that situation, there's still a lot of work to do. And like you said, if we continue to sweep it under the rug and not have a conversation about it, then we'll never get anywhere.
I mean, one of the things, and not to do a plug or anything like that, but I had a podcast for a while called F Your Racist History that talks about all those historic incidents of racism that we do sweep under the rug.
Yeah.
From the racist cartoons and songs that we, that our ice cream truck plays that we don't know. When it goes down the street and it plays that song that we all hum. A lot of people don't know that song had racist lyrics that used the N-word at first. I mean, these are still things that we hear today. I had an episode about Henry Ford and how, he inspired Adolf Hitler because Henry Ford was an anti-Semite. Henry Ford Motor Corporation, was an anti-Semite who wrote books called The International Jew. And he inspired Hitler's anti-Semitism. And there are episodes about Jim Crow and things that we don't talk about in our history books that I wanted to make sure that we know about. And it's called F Your Racist History. There are 10 episodes up. I think it's a really informative podcast. And I think that, white people need to understand where we came from. Otherwise, we are going to continue to make those same, we're going to continue to have those same atrocities happen over and over and over again.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Christian, man, I appreciate you coming on, man. We'll try to give you some of your night back, but please, can you just go ahead and plug it? First of all, tell us, where can we find the podcast, and plug everything that you have going on and what you want people to check out, man.
I appreciate it, man. It was really great to be here. If you're interested in podcasts, fyourracisthistory.com. That's the letter F, yourracisthistory.com. You can find links there. The books are called White American Youth and Breaking Hate. One is my memoir, and one is really talking about the work that I do today and helping people leave hate groups. And it's got some of the stories of the people that I've helped in there. And also, things that people can do. You had asked earlier about what the average person can do. I think Breaking Hate is kind of a roadmap for what we can all do, to break hate. And I don't know, if you want to find me, try to figure out how to spell my name and just go to christianpicciolini.com, or you can just Google, ex-skinhead, and I'm probably the first person that comes up.
Well, Christian, man, I appreciate you so much, man. Like, this has been, man, like, I can't thank you enough, bro. Like, seriously, like, you have no idea the impact that you've had on me and this night, man. This is huge, for real.
Thank you, Shepard. I really appreciate it. And Aaron, thanks for having me. Both of you guys. I love doing stuff like this. I love talking to people, and thanks for having me on.
Appreciate you, man. Most definitely.
Appreciate you.